We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good evening and welcome to a special Sunday night edition of Free Association Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix, I'm your host, and we are going to be tracking the eclipse here over the course of the next 2 hours, and I'll be joined by a number of guests. And the first guest that I'll have on today will be Melody Scott Zindell from Boulder, Colorado, and then she'll be on here for about a half an hour or so. And then we'll segue into hanging out with Richard Mystical Sun, a visionary musical artist who is videotaping the eclipse up in Mount Shasta, and we'll see him right on the heels of his videotaping the eclipse, and we'll check in with him from Mount Shasta. And then after Richard, we'll be shifting over to Chicago, where we'll check in with Sarsen, who is our feet on the ground just outside of the NATO protests in Chicago. So we're going to get a variety of looks at the eclipse. Now, Melody will be just slightly ahead of time with the eclipse, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, we're going to be going from the moon, who is Melody, to the sun, who is Richard. So the moon will be eclipsing the sun. So I think it's worked out okay this way, energetically, with her and then Richard. So somewhere in between, right around 6:30, which is when Melody will be dropping off around 6:35, something like that. That's when Richard will basically come on. So we'll have this eclipse moment with the lunar principle, the feminine principle, and the solar masculine principle sort of syncing in phase. And that'll happen in about 35 minutes or so. And that's when the eclipse takes place here in California. And it's going to be cutting across the northern part of California and down into the Colorado region, and then deeper and deeper and deeper, further and further and south. Welcome for this special 2-hour show where we're going to be tracking the eclipse. And I'm really looking forward to talking with Melody and getting her insight and some of her information and take on what's happening astrologically. It's always good to talk to other astrologers. Sometimes I get so myopic with my own world that people will send me things. Hey, look what this person did, or look what this person is writing about, or look what this person is saying. And it's just, one person can't have the ultimate view, and getting other perspectives is really kind of the Aquarian tableau in its most positive sense. With just about anything, including astrology, because it's a big ocean of sky out there, and there's some really excellent astrologers. I dropped, and Melody is one of them. I dropped a link into the chat room. If you go into the chat room, you'll be able to see that I put a link that Sarsen sent me. It's photos that have been posted to the Chicago Tribune, and they are NATO protest photos, and they're actually really pretty amazing. The amount of creativity and the amount of art that has gone into this protest is significant. I mean, the whole idea and the whole concept of protest has been really elevated to a level of art, and you can catch some of that if you're in the chat room. Washington Gale on Facebook sent me a photo of the eclipse from Japan. Absolutely stunning. And we're on. The eclipse is moving. And speaking of on, let's waste no time and bring on Melody Scott Zindell, astrologer extraordinaire, all the way from the roof of America in the Rockies. Here she is. Hello, Melody.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Having computer problems, and I just lost you, but that's good. Okay.
We're here now.
Yeah, we are here now.
It's so good to talk to another human.
I know, isn't it?
It is. Sometimes I lose touch with that when I just kind of rant into the microphone, and I'm thinking, I need more humans on my show. So welcome. What's it like there right now? Give us kind of give us the meteorological forecast for the eclipse in Colorado.
Okay, well, it's really beautiful. It's one of those surreal evenings where everyone is in anticipation, because there was a professor at CU who is part of the Fisk Planetarium, and he organized this huge gathering at the football stadium. So everybody in Boulder is keyed into this event more so than usual. And also, I don't know about you, but I've been having computer glitches and actually even heart palpitations and all kinds of weird electrical things all day. Have you noticed anything like that?
Well, I tell you, I was trying to work with the computer earlier today, and it was very difficult. I mean, it was just pages were having a hard time. It was definitely off for sure, and I was getting frustrated too. Yeah.
But it's really pretty out, It's pretty in a different kind of way, so we can feel the energy.
So what is your take on, as an astrologer? Okay, so we look at these events in the sky, and we do our best to map them, approximate them, give them some language, lace them with some meaning, and then something else takes over. Then there's this whole kind of human element where you get a stadium full of people that are driving an event with their consciousness. What is your take on something like that, and how do you think it maximizes or potentiates the astrological aspects of a given event like today's?
Well, the group consciousness, focusing on it, I mean, it totally maximizes it, but especially locally, right?
Yeah.
But, this particular eclipse is extra powerful within the context of everything else going on astrologically and, energetically. So I think that as above, so below, that extra powerful energy is stimulating people being extra focused on it, and then it's a ping pong effect. And I think the reason people are so focused on it is because it feels like I was about ready to do a newsletter, and then I did a reading I almost forgot I was supposed to do. And it's bringing in a new level of freedom and awareness within the context of all the bigger shifts going on. And it's a very mental thing. It's David Icke calls generally what we're going through a vibrational information change. And I think this eclipse is very symbolic of that whole process. So I don't know, the one thing that I was struck by, which I'm going to throw in here before I forget, because I don't usually go down mundane paths, I'm more of a metaphysical astrologer. However, when I was looking at this eclipse, I noticed that it was it's very close to Obama's moon. Obama's moon's at 3 Gemini, squaring the Pluto-Chiron axis, and other astrologers may have mentioned this too. I don't know. I haven't been keyed into what other people are saying. But what about one of the things that was interesting to me is that I was reading in a Vanity Fair about how the latest biography of Obama includes the journals from his one of his ex-Columbia Day girlfriends, and a lot of his early searchings was around his own sense of who am I, my identity,
Right.
And so of course this is going to take that to a new level, but in a way I think that's what we're all doing right now. We're figuring out who we are, what our truer sense of purpose is, who we really are in the nature of reality. We're taking all of the information that's coming to us and getting a bigger understanding of reality. So it's just sort of interesting to me how Obama may be symbolic, at least in the United States, of what collectively we're all looking at, if that makes sense.
Right. That's if you can buy into that birth date, that birth time, that birth certificate. I'm not completely sold. It might be the right birthday, it might be the right time, maybe a different place. I don't know, which is why I try to stay away from his chart, because I just think it's just so tenuous to try to. But I get it, and let's just say, that is his chart. I could absolutely see that. What's interesting too would be how the true node is opposing his moon right now, and then the true node is also in opposition with the oncoming sun, and also probably right now where we are with the moon. What's your take on the true node opposite the moon and the sun as it relates to kind of a bigger shift, bigger change, dealing with the kind of the minutia of Gemini and the big picture stuff of Sagittarius?
Let me hold on to that thought for a second, because I just did want to interject here. I totally agree with you on that birth thing with Obama. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But because, having worked a lot with sunrise charts, working with people who don't actually have their birth time, you can also look at this particular chart as just being a symbolic, sort of like a sunrise chart. It may not be accurate, but somehow, because it's hooked into the collective means, It is accurate relative to, especially when you connect it in with the U.S. Sibley chart. Yeah. And what's interesting about that, it's a little too far to be affecting the U.S. Sibley chart, but the lunar eclipse coming up is going to be on the ascendant of the U.S. Sibley chart. So even though it may or may not be the right chart, there's some deeper symbolism here on an archetypal level that, that's really interesting.
I would agree with you, because if you look at the makeup of Obama, he's black, he's white. One day he's a constitutional lawyer. The next day he's sitting down and he's having, coffee with Monsanto. To me, it really speaks to the Gemini moon on some level. There's a kind of a mercurial, slippery, emotional access point with Obama that it would make total sense that he would have a Gemini moon.
Yeah. And, he's keyed into, the whole Gemini Sag axes, to try and refocus on your other question. For me, the Gemini Sagittarian axis is the axis of the mind. So Gemini would be left brain, Sag right brain. It's Gemini's gathering the data and the information. It's sort of like being on the front row of a play and analyzing all the different details of the costumes and the actors and the way they're delivering. And then Sag would be sitting at the back of the theater taking in the bigger picture. It's the truth of what's going on. So we're assimilating our everyday experiences, and then we're trying to figure out, just like Obama was, and we're probably going to a deeper level, of who we really are and what our lives are about and what our true sense of truth is. And it is a big challenge to live our everyday life, and this is really affecting relationships as well, especially with Venus retrograde, and it's affecting our spiritual understandings with the Neptune square, the nodes. It's just a huge time of being challenged on every single level, on a mundane level, on a spiritual level, with experiences that challenge who we are, who are we, what are we on track, are we in alignment with our personal truth, Where are we going? What's really going on? What's the truth of the matter? And, you know, I didn't actually mean to make this a political thing, but Obama on some level had to decide for himself how he was going to define himself to align himself with whatever he needed to do to become president. And so he's been clearly in a certain camp with that. But let's say suddenly the people come together with a new understanding of what's going on because truths are being revealed through the data coming in, and that's a big potential with this eclipse, because eclipse changes the order big time, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's the kind of person, because this is a mutable air, and we're all feeling in limbo, and what's the next step? Let's say the people came into power, and the powers that be started diminishing in their control. Obama could easily slip over to be a figurehead for, you know, whatever is going on, where whoever needs him the most. So, so the whole thing is going back and forth about what's the next step and what's really going on. And one other thing that I noticed when I was just sort of analyzing this eclipse and trying to figure out why does this feel so powerful, because, you know, on the internet, everyone's saying things like, an alignment with the Pleiades, first time in 26,000 years, and that didn't really quite ring true to me, and I couldn't figure out where they were getting that information. So I went back and looked over some of the data, and of course there was another very, very similar annular eclipse, because this is an annular eclipse, that's at 29 degrees Taurus versus 0 degrees Gemini. But then that's an alignment with Alcyon and Pleiades. But back then in 66, Alcyon would have been closer to 29 Taurus, and now it's closer to 0 Gemini. So we had an annular solar eclipse in perfect alignment with Alcyon and the Pleiades in 1966, which is when Pluto and Uranus were conjunct at 15 degrees, and now we're coming up on the first quarter and having this annular eclipse in the exact same alignment. So it's just another symbolism of how keyed in this is to being the crises and action point of the next step of what seeds were begun in.
Interesting. Very interesting. You know, that 1966, and I think right around that time, was when they either broke ground or signed the final document for the World Trade Center. And it was right around, now that you mention it, it's right around that eclipse. So that's fascinating stuff. What do you, I was thinking today about the eclipse in terms of the masculine and the feminine. You know, I was thinking about the solar eclipse as it relates to, you know, masculine figures in our lives, fathers, for instance. You know, we think about these things on grand cosmic scales, right? Like the Pleiades, you know, Alcyon, this great central sun, and, you know, all these neutrinos, you know, getting pulsed to us from the, you know, center of the galaxy. But sometimes it really just boils down to, you know, really basic and fundamental symbolism and relationships. The sun, the father, the moon, mother. And here we have the two of them kind of sliding together in a very interesting and very powerful and intense way. And I think on some level, it really reflects, you know, our relationship, our very primary and fundamental relationship around our fathers, our mothers, and being fathers and mothers in our own lives, and ultimately the fathers and mothers of this planet. And I was just wondering if you had any sense about this, what would be the alchemical marriage between the sun and the moon as it occurs during the eclipse?
Well, yeah, all of those things you said. I mean, we have solar eclipses every 6 months, and they always herald the beginning of sort of the symbolism, in a way, is of the alchemical marriage with the feminine and the masculine, the mother and the father. And it's also, the sun is being blocked by the moon and darkened, and so the sun's light, you know, the intensity of the light of our awareness is passing. It's being disrupted. It's changing. So most of it, I think, is especially now, but it's always going to bring a level of the moon bringing in the unconscious, that the sun's brightness tends to, we tend to forget about what's going on in the darker part of the night. When the sun is out, it's very bright and light. And then when it goes down and the moon comes out, or when it's evening, it's darker. So the moon is actually the luminary of darkness, and is often in mythology and in traditional things, it has more of an evil, darker, shadowy kind of connotation, and I don't equate that or correlate that with the earth, the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, the moon is almost more, it is mother, but in the kind of astrology that I've been developing, and I've gone more away from it being mother as much as it being the ego, and it does tend to bring up the unconscious, darker aspects, especially when it's in a solar eclipse. So what we have here is then the unconscious, darker, less seen, or yin, or however you want to look at it, comes and sort of it becomes present and blocks the brightness of the sun. And that, I don't know where I'm going with this, Robert, but I was just trying to think of how I'm correlating my ideas of bringing up unconscious issues that
I think you bring up a really, it's a great take on it, and I think that that what you're trying to say is that the moon at this phase gives us a greater sense of contact with those hidden, shadowy aspects of ourselves that we tend to gloss over, protect through our acculturation and the shell of the ego. I think that's what you're saying. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it brings an awareness about what needs to change. And with this Gemini Sag, it's really activating the whole idea of purpose and truth and what's real and what's not real, and the mind, opening up the mind to a greater level of consciousness, which a lot of people are talking about. And, and it's also that Gemini polarity of, Castor and Pollux, the light and the dark. It does challenge us to bring in the unconscious and bring in the other side and look at what we've been ignoring and bring them integrate them in so that we can begin a new cycle. But it always then disrupts the old, and it always forces change.
Yeah. I try to find these events that correlate to major aspects, and sometimes they're below the radar. And I just read a story which I put in my latest newsletter about an FBI agent by the name of Stephen Ivins. Have you heard about this guy? Did you hear about this at all?
No.
So what happened was, this happened in Southern California. He's a young FBI agent, and he started to tail a Russian envoy. Like he was trying to like talk to the Russians, okay? Because he was already following them and doing his little espionage information gathering thing. But he went up to them and basically started yelling at them, saying that there is going to be another false flag and that all these people are fucking insane. And this is a true story. And he had these agents try to descend on him, and he kind of got into the mix with the Russians, and then he got away, and then he took off, and now he's in like the desert and the hills of Southern California somewhere. This is a true story. The guy who he reports to, I think his last name is Schellenben or something like that. He got arrested. Schellenben got taken out. The guy he reported to got taken out, and he's an explosives expert, by the way. And he was one of the people that was in New York during 9/11. So this guy immediately got taken right off the streets. This other guy, Ivans, is up in the hills somewhere, and his wife has pleaded to him on TV to come home, and it's okay. And I thought about what you were saying, and the moon, and how it relates to lunacy, right? And here we go. We have information. We're talking Gemini. We're talking spycraft. You know, duality. The Russians, the Americans, and all of a sudden this guy just loses it and starts spouting that there's going to be another false flag, and everybody's fucking insane. You know, this is all right on the heel, right at the beginning of this eclipse. I don't know. I think it's a really interesting kind of symbol for kind of, you know, where we are pre-eclipse, and very interesting as to where we might be post-eclipse when the moon passes by and we get to see some of maybe more of this hidden material, and people not being able to handle the amount of deceit and the amount of illusion that they've been able to handle before. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely, and I totally agree. And I'm really looking at that too. And I'm also noticing how people's unconscious shadows are just being blurted out without any control.
Yeah.
You know, and that does equate with lunacy on some levels. But on some levels, it's just like suddenly you lose it when you haven't lost it for 20 years, or suddenly you're saying things to people that are really not quite up to par with the emotional maturity you've reached, or, you know, people are just kind of purging on a verbal level. And it is interesting because it all ties into this whole idea of, I'm sorry, my brain is a little scattered today too, but something you said relative to secrets being revealed and all of that. And one other thing, too, that is interesting with the whole 1966 correlation, because you can just feel the energy, something's about ready to burst, you know?
Yeah.
And it's making people a little bit crazy. And on an individual level, we're a little out of control with things, and things are just coming out, and that will happen on a bigger level, too. And while we were talking, actually, because I got the idea, as you said something earlier, I looked up what also happened in May of 1966 was the first speech by Martin Luther King and the first big 10,000-foot people protest in front of the White House and the beginning of the Cultural Revolution in China. So the energies are the same, but I think they're amped up now because we're at one more round of the spiral, where back then it was the seeds being laid, so the conjunction, and now we have the first quarter square, so the crisis is much more intense and palpable, and something has to be done, and people don't know how to handle it necessarily. So, yeah.
Well, here we are. I mean, my thought about this whole lunacy piece is that, just like you were saying, people just spouting things from kind of an unconscious level. And my take was that, you know, over the course of the next, really, because the tail, you know, the eclipse can last, the effects, like up to a week, maybe even a little more. But, you know, my sense is that people are going to show themselves during this eclipse, and just in the days after. And I think you're absolutely right. What is your take on this Chinese dissident Chen, who's just recently received asylum in the U.S.? I noticed that his Saturn is in Gemini at 4 degrees, which is conjunct the moon, which is conjunct the sun, and which is opposite the true node right now. And he's got about 4 planets in Sagittarius, all fairly early degrees. Do you have any kind of thoughts around him, and symbolically, since the eclipse is coming from Asia and he's coming from Asia, do you have any thoughts about that?
I haven't thought about it. To be honest, I've been really, for the first time in my life, I haven't been paying attention to politics because I've been consumed with some personal drama that's been overwhelming me. So, and it's been along the same lines of what we're talking about, but it's really taken me away from what's going on. But just off the cuff, symbolically, oh gosh, I'll probably think of exactly what I want to say after we're done. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to say much right now, though.
That's okay.
I mean, this whole China thing is just very confusing to me because, you know, what's really going on and what we're hearing going on, it's just very, very difficult to know what's really going on, you know.
True.
And because of that, it's gone to levels where I've almost given up trying to track it because it gets harder and harder to figure out, and there's so many different fantastical stories coming from so many different arenas. And what's really true and what's really not, and where's the world really going? And see, these are the kinds of questions that are reaching sort of a peak that I think that this eclipse is going to kind of break things through, because it lasts about a week, but I've also noticed that any time within the next 3 to 6 months after the eclipse, the changes are integrated, and we really do have huge shifts in whatever area of our life is being touched natally by it. But worldwide, you know, I think personally that the big theme is what's really going on and what's the next step and what's the truth of the matter and how do we all fit into it, and people wanting to understand what's really going on. So like my confusion about it is a perfect symbol of like this eclipse suddenly bringing to fore a little bit more information. If that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Sorry, Robert.
What do you make of Jupiter moving into Gemini really pretty shortly after this eclipse?
Well, that's just adding to the whole thing, because it's a Gemini-Sag axis, you know.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be exposed to more and more information, and we're going to be able to tell, you know, it's going to be confusing to people, and I think that's a little bit where the going a little insane and being off kilter and feeling insecure and our shadows coming up. It's all tied into like how much can a brain take in, and you know, time and information is already going so quickly, and you know we're getting down to time zero of Terence McKenna, and life is just rushing, and we're getting more and more and more information, and so that Jupiter in Gemini is just going to exacerbate that. But for those who are willing to, I mean, it's going to be a real challenge to do the left brain, right brain synthesis, and also to stay centered in the heart chakra, not in the lower chakras of either fear or emotion, so that we can really be open and available to the truth of what's really going on without getting wigged out by it, because our understanding of ourselves and our place in our life, I think, is really going to be changing quickly. And Jupiter in Gemini is just one more example of that happening. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right, and I get the sense that you're going to see a lot of migration happen with Jupiter and Gemini. People moving. I see a lot of people moving, leaving their homes. I actually see people leaving the U.S. during Jupiter and Gemini, to be honest with you. Even though it's not, you know, it's not like Jupiter and Sag, and people are, you know, traveling across the world, but because it's on that axis, it could be drawn to the true node, right? With Jupiter and Gemini, and I think a lot of this has to do with, you know, what's going on with the housing crisis and mortgages, and which I think is going to get deeper and deeper as we get further and further into summer. So that's my sense of Jupiter. There's a lot of people moving around, a lot of migration. I think a lot of people also try to find more creative ways of living during Jupiter and Gemini, teaming up, you know, living together, more sort of, you know, kind of group-related living spaces. Yeah, I just see lots of activity. Like the hive mind is really excited during Jupiter and Gemini, and as a result, there's just a ton of movement. So that's one manifestation that I see around this, and I just also get a sense that the pressure is going to get, you know, higher and higher and greater, and we're going to be looking for, you know, ways to release this pressure. And Jupiter in Gemini is very social in a lot of ways too. I mean, you know, I could see people going out a lot and you know, trying to work this pressure out by letting, you know, their id out or their subconscious out, in kind of a more open and out there kind of way. I mean, so I get a sense that there's going to be a lot of stress and tension, but again, a lot of people trying to just like let it rip and get through something.
Yeah, and then hopefully we can all also use it to make some of the dramatic shifts that bring us more in alignment with how we're really supposed to be living our life, who's really supposed to be in our life, where we're really supposed to be living. Just a thought I had when you were saying all of that. Of course, the other thought is we can talk for hours about it, but, this migration is also probably going to be due to things that are happening of an earth change nature also.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, right now, it is 6:35, and we have hit the eclipse here. I'm looking right outside my window, and the sky has gotten dark. So it is on right now in California. And yeah.
So here it's very kind of a magical, very surreal glow, but because we're not right in the past, it's just a partial. And I'm not in a place where I can actually look out and see it, but I can see through the window the lighting, and it's definitely, you can feel it happening, and everything is really quiet.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Here, in terms of just ambient sounds, I can hear some birds chirping, but the wind really picked up pretty intense just before the eclipse. So, so we've got some action happening there. You live in a really interesting part of the world. You're way up there, high altitude, a mile up above the rest of us. And you've got this really kind of enlightened community in Boulder, and then you've got a kind of a really hardcore kind of Christian community in Denver. To me, that's also kind of indicative of the Gemini energy, right? And in some ways, you've got this kind of bicameral split. What's that like living there amongst these two really kind of different universes?
Well, the real Christian, the hardcore, is in Colorado Springs, not Denver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's down the road. Yeah, it's down the road a ways.
Yeah. Okay, what's it like? My son is in Gemini, and so my whole life has been that examining the dualistic nature of the Gemini reality, because I was born in a family of Christian missionaries, but at 4 had a spiritual awareness that I could not go down that path and, figuratively and emotionally divorced myself from my family and started thinking for myself. So even today, I'll have half my Facebook friends are old family friends who are hardcore fundamental Christians, and I'm not, and yet we all coexist together, interchange ideas, and try to work out our different philosophies. And so, it has to be that way. That's where it's all going, because at the end of the day, we're all one. Well, what does that mean? It means that some of us have chosen to experience this facet of reality, and some have chosen to experience that facet of reality. But any of the people that are staying too polarized in their little group on one side or the other, they're the ones that are going to get really stressed out by this upcoming change of consciousness that I think that this solar eclipse is really kind of giving it a little extra push. Because at the end of the day, we don't need to change our ideas or who we are, but we all do need to realize we're all a facet of the same being and learn to view ourselves as a whole versus these really polarized groups. So, of course, Stephen King wrote The Stand, was, it was in Boulder. Did you read that book?
Well, I tell you, what's really interesting is when I came out, I went to Colorado a couple of years ago, and I was driving from, and I didn't know this, by the way, but I was driving from the airport, which is a whole other story, the airport, and then coming into Denver, and there's that stretch between the airport and Denver where there's like these billboards. It's kind of, you know, it's a lot of kind of Christian billboards, and so some of the houses look really funky, and you know, and I thought to myself, you know, if this is where, you know, the Great Tribulation, there was going to be a Great Tribulation, it would take place between the Denver airport and Denver. That's what I thought. Like, this is where the stand would be. And I had no idea that the stand took place in Colorado, in Boulder.
In Boulder, the ultimate end game of the fight between good and evil is in Boulder, Colorado.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so we do see, I mean, I'm seeing it very clearly. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the polarization of people, but it's not just like Christian and not Christian. It's the polarization of ideas, of stances, of thoughts and beliefs of any kind. Mm-hmm. And people are getting really like, well, this is the truth. And somebody else will go, no, this is the truth. And, you know, they're fighting each other regardless of what those two truths are. Mm-hmm. And those are the situations that this eclipse is exacerbating and where the real ugliness is coming in, which is why, you know, Sagittarius has to do with belief systems. And Gemini has to do with like just information gathering and synthesis. So one's the relative truth and the other is the absolute truth. Yeah. And so we're really being challenged collectively, you know, to look at what is true on a natural law, bigger, like ultimate truth level, and what is just relative truth, and how do we get along without killing ourselves, and so on and so forth. But so the struggle is here. I mean, Boulder is a really intense place to live because it's very cocoonish and isolated from the rest of Colorado, and very elitist and very polarized in its kind of elitism, and that's every bit as dangerous as the fundamental polarization in Colorado Springs. And Denver is actually somewhere kind of in between the two, you know. Yeah. So,
well, spoken like a true Gemini, you know, I mean, that's great. I think one of the things that Gemini as a lesson has to offer is a real sense of the witness and objectivity, because I know a fair amount of Geminis, and they're not always invested in any particular position, but they are interested in finding out about things. So maybe one of the things that we're going to be able to do with this Jupiter and Gemini is to help develop our witness self, you know, on a collective level and on an individual level, and step back and just watch how things go down and not necessarily jump into the fray with our, you know, with our attitudes, our belief systems, or, you know, our sense of rightness.
Right, and then we can also take the information in that witness self, the neutral data collecting and the synthesizing of it, and then come to a clear understanding of our personal truth, you know? Mm-hmm. What's true for us? Where should we be? Where do we need to be? So that we're in alignment and integrity with what we're doing here on Earth, instead of just being swept by the winds of change and the winds of conditioning and the winds of brainwashing, and you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I totally agree. Well, if people want to find out more about you and your particular brand of astrology, and, you know, even working with you because I know that you're not just an astrologer, you bring a lot of other things into the mix, and very relevant discoveries in your own way. Where can people find you?
Astrologywithmelody.com. So my name's Melody.
Astrology with Melody. Okay. And
astrologywithmelody.com. And even, you know, that's the easiest way to, you know, go from there. I have a couple of Facebook pages, and to be honest, my full-time job is my son, and so I would love to do a lot more than I do, but again, my main focus is readings at this point, because so.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on, Melody. It's, you know, been meaning to have you back on. This seemed like a good opportunity for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great talking to you, and a really good idea for the show. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of it.
Okay. Well, take good care and enjoy Enjoy surfing the rest of the eclipse, okay?
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Melody. Bye-bye. Melody Scott Zindell, all the way from Boulder, Colorado, giving us the Gemini perspective. I forgot that Melody was a Gemini, and she, helped remind me and remind us about this ability to bring in all kinds of different information, like, hey, so what? Maybe that's not Obama's birth certificate, but here's the sunrise chart, and there's enough information here which gives him some credence, and the Gemini moon some credence. So perhaps this is a workable aspect for him, which I think it is. I mean, if you know anything about like rectification and trying to kind of get a sense, obviously with the Gemini moon, it wouldn't be that hard to rectify. You'd want to rectify the rising sign, but if you know anything about rectification and ascribing certain aspects to an individual and kind of lining them up, the Gemini moon would be a perfect moon for Obama, particularly since he's got kind of a shadowy background, shall we say, in terms of where he came from. Pretty shadowy background. The last two Democratic presidents both have really shadowy backgrounds. Bill Clinton was, he had a stepfather, and most people in Arkansas know that his father, his true father, is a Rockefeller, but that's a whole other story. But Obama, one of the things that the Obama, the birthers or people that have looked deeply into Obama, one of the things that they've found out and uncovered is that there's a gap between when Obama is at, I believe, Columbia, which is an interesting university, right? And then what else? And Harvard Law. So the gap is he actually goes to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and he works for a company in New York, and it's a business company. I think it's IBC or BIC, Business International Corporation, which is essentially a front for the CIA. And so Obama's got a background in intelligence, an intelligence background. So that would match up perfectly with the Gemini moon, especially as we look at the rectification of the Gemini moon as it relates to Barack Hussein Obama, a.k.a. Barry Soetoro, who is, when you sit down and think about this, and let's just sit down and think about it for a moment, I don't think I've ever seen a president with more power than Obama. And now that power is ceded to him, it's given to him. But I don't think I've ever seen it. George Bush had his own version of power. A lot of power. He had a lot of power. He did a lot of damage. But Obama pretty much he does whatever he wants. And he has a bulletproof grin. Like he knows that nothing is ever going to happen to him. That's the sense you get when you look at him. And then when you see all these things that are taking place, the executive orders and, the reversing or the reversals on any number of positions, he's not really attached to any of it. And nobody has really come out and challenged him, maybe some people on the far right, but even the Republicans who wanted to go after his relationship with Jeremiah Wright, they were told, and Romney told him to back off. And he gets away with just about anything he wants. Anything he wants. So it's fascinating to see this. Now, I'm expecting a phone call from Richard Mystical Sun, and I hope he calls in on the show and not on my cell phone, because that would be a bummer. We tried that the other day with Paul from Scotland, and that did not work out that well. Not at all. Let me just see here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of music, and I'm going to try and track down Richard, and maybe he'll actually call in while music is playing, because I think that's likely. And what I'm going to do is just try to get him on the line so we can get a glimpse of what the sun is doing all the way from Mount Shasta, which, by the way, is from what I understand, when I used to run in the metaphysical circles of theosophy, or the theosophical illuminist Alice Bailey circles, that Mount Shasta is the sixth chakra of the United States. It is the third eye of the United States. That's how they view Mount Shasta. It's a very sacred place. If you've never been to Mount Shasta, I'd highly recommend it. Just from a physical standpoint, it's an amazing and inspiring place on earth. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I used to do sweat lodges up in Mount Shasta. So let me do this. Let's try to let's get some music on here, and let's use this as an opportunity to see if we can get Richard. Here he is. He says, "Hi, this is trying to call you." Let me just do this. Let me go here. Replies go 347-200-8995. Okay. Sorry, this is one of the challenges of doing a show while you're a single dad and doing about 5 other jobs. Sometimes, things fall through the cracks every now and then. And I should have given Richard the show number. So we should get him here momentarily. Richard, by the way, is a musician, and he has a new record that is coming out next Friday. It's called Cassiopeia, and I'm going to have him on the show for a more prolonged period of time, and we can talk more about his music and Cassiopeia, which is a fantastic record. And it's electronic music. It's super sophisticated electronic music. And at the end of today's show, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a piece from his record, which is, I believe, it's called Tropical Rain. Hold on. I just downloaded it here. Holographic Rain from Cassiopeia. I'm going to play that towards the end of the show. It's about 5 minutes and 49 seconds. It's a pretty spectacular track. And hopefully we get Richard on here. I have never met Richard, although he does not live that far from me. And we actually spoke on the first time today. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Let's try this. Hey, Richard. I'm good. Hey, did you get my text?
I called that. It didn't see a phone number. I got like an answering or something.
The 347-308-8995?
Let me see if it's the same one.
Because I just
347-200-8895?
No, 347-308-8995. I think that the number got changed.
No, it's 347-308.
Yes.
Call that?
Yeah, call back and let's get you on and let's talk about the eclipse, okay?
Okay.
Thanks.
308?
308-8995. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So there we go. The wonders of modern technology going from one form of communication to the other. So Richard will be dialing in here in about 5 seconds, and I'll hold off on playing the music. After Richard, we're going to have Sarsen on from Chicago. We're just outside of Chicago, and we're going to get the latest on NATO. There's a photo inside the chat room that I put with a link, and it's Obama coming off the plane, shaking Rahm Emanuel's hand as he comes off the gangplank of the plane. And Michelle Obama is in the picture as well. She's behind Obama. They're not touching. And there's a guy. He's military. I think he's either Air Force or Navy. Maybe he's a Marine. I don't know what branch of service he's in. But he's in the photo, and he's looking sideways at Obama and Michelle coming off the plane. And he is like shooting Michelle Obama just a cold stare, an absolutely, freezing cold stare. It's a glare. It's more than a stare. It's a glare. And if you're in the chat room, you can click on that link and check that out and see it for yourself. So here we go. So show not started. All right, we're having technical difficulties. Hold on. Here we go. Let's do this one more time. Hold on. We got, let's see, 3, 4, 7, 3, 0, 8, 8, 9, 9, 5. Okay. All right. We're almost there with Richard. We're going to get there. I promise. It's the eclipse. This is what happens. We've been dealing with computer stuff, now cell phony stuff. I can blame it on the eclipse. Why not? Worse has been blamed on the eclipse. By the way, I noticed that as I was researching some facts, theoretical facts for my newsletter, that prior to a number of eclipses, something really interesting happened. And it involves the Kennedy family. And John F. Kennedy and his son, and now Mary Kennedy, all died just before or just after an eclipse. And in the case of John F. Kennedy, it was just before the eclipse. And in, I believe it was 1966, Robert F. Kennedy also died just prior to an eclipse. And the Beatles released the White Album on the 22nd of November, 11/22, which is the day that John F. Kennedy was shot, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. So Revolution number 1, Revolution number 9, Helter Skelter, all coming out on the White Album, all on 11/22, just after the death of Robert F. Kennedy, on the 3-year anniversary of the death of John F. Kennedy. Fascinating stuff. The other thing that I noticed that was related to the Kennedy trial, or the Kennedy assassination, is that Bobby Kennedy, who was killed in 1966, which goes back to what Melody was talking about earlier with the last solar eclipse. I believe Bobby Kennedy was killed in, I think it was June or July of 1966. So it would have been would have been right around the same time as just after that solar eclipse, which is what she was talking about. Fascinating. But the other thing too is that just recently a woman has come out and talked about how she was a witness to the killings, and she talked about how that there were more than one shot, or more shots fired than the shots that Sirhan had come out of his gun, theoretically. All right, so we're still trying to get Richard on here, and so it's 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995, and hopefully it says here the show's not started. I don't get this. All right, so tell you what we're going to do. There's somebody on hold here. Let's find out who's on hold while we're waiting for Richard. Here we go. Hello there. Hello? No, you're not there anymore. No. All right, I'm going to play a piece of music, and hopefully we can get this sorted out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to play Holographic Rain by Richard Mystical Sun. And hopefully by the time we get through this, we'll be able to bring him on. Okay, so here's Holographic Rain. I'm dipping into the chat room for a few minutes. So let's try this. And on the back end, hopefully we'll have Richard Mystical Sun. Here we go. You know, I tell you, sometimes I just wish I could get technology that would be really responsive. So I had to refresh the window, and then I wanted to pop down here to get the music down to a nice manageable level, and it just won't do it. So let's waste no more time and bring Richard on the air. Here we go, Richard Mystical Sun. Hey, Richard.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, we're here. We got it. So I think the big challenge was I had to, refresh the window. So it's one of those old adages with technology, either unplug, restart, or refresh, and here you are.
Oh, boy, tell me about technology. So I had planned to film this thing and make a little HD movie.
Yeah.
And I made a special filter,
yeah.
And I put on a set of binoculars, and I had the binoculars on a tripod, and I had a flip camera, an HD camera set up perfectly, and it was just magically set. And then a truck came by and blew some dust. So I took the filter off just to dust it off. And by the time I put it on, the binoculars had melted the camera lens.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So I'm out. Luckily, it's only a flip camera. But, on the way up here, I was reading about the Navajo, and they say that, you shouldn't even try to look at an eclipse because they thought it was rude because it's the sun being reborn. And
right.
I'm just going to take it as a hint that I shouldn't have tried to record it.
So did you get anything? Because you wanted to use this for your new record.
Yeah, well, I got a couple stills I think might turn out, but it was really hard. It was very difficult to even get anything to come out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Shasta is a heavy place, man. It's got very intense energy.
Definitely.
Yeah. I've noticed with Shasta, my times up there, that if you were there and it's like one of these earth grid points like Hawaii, that if you were there and you're in the right place in the right frame of mind, you could have a really powerful time. And if you're not, it will rock your world. So how did you internalize that when that happened?
I just took it as, a lot of people came here and they're on the side of Mount Shasta and they didn't bring eclipse glasses, and I had a few extra. And so I ended up just, letting people come up and look through the binoculars to see the eclipse. So I was able to, share the experience with a lot of people who were here who weren't prepared.
Uh-huh. So what's the vibe?
I take it as it goes. It's a mixed vibe. There's some people who are singing an ancient Brazilian chant over here, and then there's some other people who are having a cookout listening to reggae. And there's some people making coyote calls down there. It's pretty much all over the map. Yeah.
Have you seen any of the I Am people around there walking around with all their purple?
Probably. Yeah. Mount Shasta's got definitely an interesting vibe to it, in the downtown.
Is there still snow up on the top of the mountain?
Yeah. You can only bunny flat right now, and then it's snowed in.
Yeah. So, other than the eclipse? The eclipse. Other than the melting of your lens, which is unfortunate. So, what's your take so far, and how does this relate to you, AKA Richard Mystical Sun? Because this is in a lot of ways, Mystical Sun kind of moment.
Yeah, it is, and I just. With the opportunity to happen, and I decided, I need to go see this. It's just, like you said, it's a mystical sun kind of moment. So you can't pass this up. Mm-hmm. But, one of the benefits was with the lens melting is that I got to use the binoculars more than I would have because the camera would have been hooked up to them. and so I wouldn't have sort of when I got home. So I was able to really get a lot of close-up of the eclipse. And, when it's right in the middle, it was a perfect ring. Absolutely perfect. And it was almost like a portal or a doorway that you could just go through.
Uh-huh.
It was like a hole in the sun, basically. And it was pretty powerful at that moment, very powerful. And then as it moved off, the filters were changing the color slightly, but as it moved off, the edge of the moon was this purpley, like, magenta color, and then the other side where the sun was coming back was like this light orange. It was like really, really amazing coloring as it moved right off.
Mm-hmm.
Something, yeah, it's a lot like a lunar eclipse, but it's a lot better.
Yeah.
You definitely got to have the right eye gear. I looked a few times without any eye gear, and you can't see anything. It's just like the sun's just a little weaker, like maybe what it would look like going through some clouds.
Interesting. So how long do you plan on staying up there? Are you gonna ride the eclipse out for a couple of days, or are you driving back?
Gonna drive back tonight.
Yeah,
I just drove up from the Bay Area to try to see it, and gonna drive back. Go to work on Monday.
Well, let's talk about your new record. I was playing a little bit of music there, and I knew if I started playing your music that you'd show up. So, and I didn't really want to interrupt the track. I was playing. Is it Holographic Rain? Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah, I was playing that.
Mix.
Yeah, exactly. It sounding great. So you've got this new record coming out. In terms of CDs, is this your third or fourth? Where are we now?
Depends on how you count. I have a self-titled release from '94, which was called Primordial Atmospheres, but I only sell that from the website. So this would be the fourth. But I don't necessarily consider it an official Mystical Sun album like the later versions. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, to me, it's more demo. It was the beginning. Right.
So what led you to get into a fairly non-commercial style of music, although absolutely gorgeous?
Thank you.
And I listened to Cassiopeia last week when you sent me that link. So what led you into space music? What was your path towards creating this type of ambient space music?
Well, it's kind of complex, but to sum it up, it's a bit like having your own spaceship. NASA kind of fell down on us, and when I was a kid growing up in the '70s, I was pretty sure I was going to be living on a space station by now.
Right.
And I didn't get that, so you got to travel someplace, and that's how I travel. I try to create music that reminds me of being someplace, in a distant galaxy or on another planet or something like that. Try to alter, my perceptions of reality and use sound to create a place rather than to create, like typical music is about sort of whatever a person feels or their thoughts and opinions. And what I'm trying to do with music is create sort of like a holodeck.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
So obviously we're these biosensors, and we're taking things in all the time. How would you internalize a moment like an eclipse, and how would you see an eclipse actually somehow getting played out in your music?
Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to internalize it, because I'm going to reflect on it for the rest of the night. And I had very good concentration during the main part of it. And so I try to just sort of be aware of my perceptions and take it in as much as possible, and then try to replay it later to try to understand what it means. It takes a while to kind of digest. But it's interesting. The Navajo or the Hopi believe it's the sun being reborn. And, I can kind of see that. I can see why they would say that.
Yeah.
Because the sun is very hard to film like this. I thought I had it all planned out. I read my manuals. I did my research. I had everything set up. And it's just not easy to take a picture of.
Yeah.
At least not when you're just trying to do it for the first time.
Well, you're a Virgo, aren't you? Is that your sun sign?
No, actually a Leo.
Oh, you're a Leo, so there we go. There's the sun again.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh? So your record comes out next week, literally a week
23rd.
after the eclipse, right?
Actually, the 23rd. On the 23rd.
Oh, just days after the eclipse, your record is out. That's pretty auspicious, don't you think?
Yeah. I couldn't work better if I've actually tried to plan it, and I didn't. I didn't. You see, I can't. One thing about the way I make music is I kind of discover it as I work on it, and I don't have any control of how long it takes. And so the interval this time was 3 years. So it just happened to come out at the right time. You know, if I tried to do it on purpose, I don't think I would make the right date. You know, too much pressure.
So 3 years is pretty significant. This is like 3 years out of your life for one personal expression. Now, when you emailed me, you said that this was really, I guess, for lack of a better term, tour de force. Like you'd really put it all together with this record. How did you know that you were really onto something and that this was really something you'd be really proud of?
I don't know yet. You know, each one is like a child, and you put it out there, and you see what happens as it goes off on its own. You know, we're living in an age where this type of music isn't necessarily, you know, the kind of thing people are looking for. So I just try to make whatever I can the best that I can, and hope that someone can find a benefit from it in a positive way, and try to, you know, create a little more harmony instead of all the dissonance around the world.
Yeah, for sure. Now you live near Mount Diablo, which is another pretty impressive mountain in its own way. What's it like living kind of in the foothills of the highest mountain in the Bay Area, and a mystical mountain? I mean, that's where the Indians would do their medicine work, was up on Mount Diablo. What's that like?
It's incredible. So I grew up. I was transplanted to Florida as a kid, and I grew up there, and it's completely flat. And when I moved to California about 15 years ago, the mountains just totally blew me away. And since then, I've just had to be around mountains as much as possible, because if you grow up in a place where it's just two-dimensional, it's flat, and you experience mountains, it's kind of like I don't know how to explain it. It's more transformative, I think, than if you see them as a kid, because you get used to them.
Yeah.
You know, like for instance, if you take like the nearest analogy I can make is like the Kogi tribe in Colombia. They have this tradition where they make their shamans, and what they do is they raise them for the first 8 or 9 years of their lives in caves, and they never get to see the outside world. And then when they finally are brought out into the outside world is so much more interesting to them and powerful to them than if they'd seen it their whole lives. And it's kind of like that, living there. Yeah. So I get a boost out of mountains. I just love mountains. It's just, especially a volcano. I mean, you can't beat a volcano.
So do you see experience any interesting phenomena around Mount Diablo at all?
Yeah, definitely. There's always kinds of weird stuff, and it definitely creates its own weather for the East Bay. You know, yeah. It's got moods. It can, one side of the mountain it can be raining and kind of nasty. On the other side of it, it's nice and sunny and a totally different day. And even different places where you can go on it. There's different places you can go on it while you're on it and have different experiences.
Yeah, there's lots of little microclimates there. Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes on a very clear day, which is hard to get in the Bay Area, sometimes in winter, you can actually see with binoculars Mount Shasta.
Wow.
From the top of Mount Diablo, yeah.
That's
rare, though.
Pretty rare. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So do you know about the history and the lore of Mount Shasta at all?
A little bit.
So do you know who Guy Ballard is?
Refresh my mind.
So Guy Ballard, so there's this group up in Mount Shasta called the I-Ams, right? You'll see him walking around with these purple suits. And
yes, I've seen some of those, yes.
So Guy Ballard was the first member of the I-Am movement, or the I-Am group. And he supposedly got taken inside of Mount Shasta.
Right. I read about that, yeah.
And
lava tubes or something.
Yeah, and he went in there, and that's where he met these ascended beings, right? You know, who theoretically were also aliens, and that's where the whole sort of American version of the ascended master story gets taken and then put out to the at that time not much of a mainstream, but it's Saint Germain and
Yeah.
Kuthumi and all these ascended masters, which theoretically Guy Ballard actually met inside of Mount Shasta. So
I wouldn't doubt that there's stuff going on inside Mount Shasta, because we've been over to Modoc, Lava Beds National Monument,
right,
and the lava tubes there, and once you go in those lava tubes, that's like a whole nother deal. I mean, you can go in lava tubes and just it's like going into the womb of the earth, and you don't even know if you're gonna, it's like you don't know if you get stuck in there or what. Just you can go really far in Lava Beds National Monument. I highly recommend that for anybody who ever comes up this way.
So that's in Modoc.
Yeah, it's in the border of Oregon and California, and there's a lot of other great lava tubes around here, like Pluto Cave, where you can go in and go pretty deep too. But that's the thing about the volcanoes; they create these giant tunnels that just go endlessly for when the lava flows.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing.
That makes total sense. Yeah. What about you ever seen the lenticular clouds? Do you have any lenticular cloud action around Shasta right now at all, or is it clear up there?
It was clear, but then right as the eclipse ended and it started moving off, the clouds came in over it. So if there is a lenticular cloud, it'd be above me.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not able to see it, though. But it is getting pretty cloudy right now.
Okay. All right. Well, listen. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to transition out of here, and I'm going to play that piece of music, Holographic Rain, which I was trying to play and before you came onto the show. So let me do that, and then let's circle back again, maybe sometime next week or the week after, one of the two, and then we'll bring you back on. We'll talk more about your record. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. Have a safe journey. Thanks for checking in with us from Mount Shasta. And if you happen to go inside the mountain, make sure that your lens isn't fried, or at least you can get a good picture with your cell phone camera.
I'll definitely do that. If you don't hear from me in a week, then you'll know I succeeded.
All right. Thanks, Richard.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Richard Mystical Sun from Mount Shasta, experiencing the eclipse with people singing, playing reggae music, singing Brazilian songs. Probably the Brazilian songs are probably maybe they're ayahuasca songs from Santo Daime. Okay, let's play his track again, and then we'll listen to Holographic Rain, and we'll be waiting for Sarsen from Chicago to call in, and then we'll get into what's happening outside of the front lines of the NATO protests. So from Mount Shasta to the heartland. I'll be back in about 6 minutes and 44 seconds with Sarsen. That was Richard Mystical Sun with Holographic Rain, the Cassiopeia mix here on the Friday version of Free Association Radio. This is the Eclipse special. We've been talking to Melody Scott Zindell from Boulder, Colorado, Richard Mystical Sun, not just any sun, a mystical sun from Mount Shasta. And we're going to have Sarsen, a good friend of the show and the website, calling in from Chicago, and we're going to be talking about what's happening there on the streets and He's not actually in Chicago. He's just outside of Chicago. So maybe it's good that he's just outside of Chicago, because seems pretty chaotic and hectic. There's arrests going on, and I think most of you might know about the 3 young men who were just sitting around their apartment just a couple days ago, and they were greeted by some of Chicago's finest and a battering ram and took out their apartment door. All 3 of them were arrested on charges of terrorism, of domestic terrorism, and under the NDAA and the Patriot Act. So they are now being held because it was believed that they were going to concoct Molotov cocktails and launch them at the guys in suits and batons at NATO. And there's apparently not very much evidence that supports that. What they did found was some beer-making equipment, according to these 3 guys and their lawyer. So that happened just before the NATO summit was about to take place. And it's going to be interesting to see how that gets played out, because there was a judge by the name of Catherine Forrest, who I believe she's in Virginia, and I think it's the 2nd Circuit Court of Appeals. She heard a case that was brought forth by a number of people that were suing Obama and the government around the NDAA, and she put an injunction on the NDAA, and she ruled it unconstitutional. And apparently it was a very lengthy 14-page dissertation and response to the legality of the NDAA. So there is now a sitting injunction, and the Obama administration is going to have to appeal. They're going to have to appeal this decision, and likely this could get tested and taken all the way to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is not only going to be staring down the legitimacy of Obamacare, but also the NDAA. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these 3 guys, because there is a standing injunction against the NDAA. Again, this happened this past week. Now, I don't know if it happened before they were arrested or after they were arrested. If it happened after they were arrested, then they might be grandfathered into the NDAA and continue to be held. But if it happened after, then the administration and the lawyers for these guys have a lot of talking to do between one another. Because theoretically, based on what Catherine Forrest or what Justice Forrest has ruled on, it's illegal. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets played out. You probably haven't heard that much about it from the mainstream media, but it's there, it's happening, and the NDAA, according to Justice Forrest, is null and void. It is an injunction, and it's temporary, so we'll have to see how that gets played out. But the administration will have to address it. Okay, so I just put the phone number in the chat room. We're going to get Sarsen on in the next minute or two and get him talking about what's happening in Chicago. Let's see where we are here. So the All Points Bulletin for our arch-mage. You know, he sends me some of the best news tips out of anybody that visits my website or my radio show. He sends me some of the absolute best news tips. Really amazing stuff. So hopefully within the next 10 to 15 seconds, he'll be dialing in. I thought it was really interesting that Mark Zuckerberg got married the day after Facebook went public. So in California, based on California marital law, his wife, Mrs. Zuckerberg, formerly Chan, only gets half of what he has, I think, the day after his IPO, right? So everything pre-IPO is his. Everything post-IPO is theirs. I mean, how arch is that? You know, he's going to get married the day after his IPO. That is so calculated. So calculated. And I believe, you know, he got married on a Venus retrograde and on a Saturn retrograde. I don't hold a lot of optimism for Zuck and his marriage, to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to last. You don't get married during a Venus retrograde. One man's opinion. And especially, a day, 2 days before the eclipse? I don't think that's if I were his astrologer, I wouldn't have advised it. By the way, have you ever noticed that Mark Zuckerberg does not blink? Next time you see a video of him, watch him. He can talk for 3-4 minutes at a time and not blink. I don't think that's human. I don't think it's human. Maybe he's not even human. Well, one thing we do know is that the Facebook IPO took a big dump, didn't we? I think the problem with the Facebook IPO is that it was, well, one of the problems with the Facebook is that they don't really make any money. I mean, they do make some money, but everything that is evaluated about Facebook is about intellectual capital. It's all about information. It's like information as a currency. It's not about the actual transactions of hard currency. Yes, they get a piece of the action when somebody, you know, buys a cow on Farmville. They get a cut from Zynga. But, you know, the income generating that Facebook actually does pales in comparison to, say, what an Amazon does. Amazon actually takes money in. For Facebook, it's all, you know, one of the things that they do sell, and this is one of the things that you can't often quantify with an IPO or even with a bottom line. So let's say Facebook is trafficking in intelligence. It's an intelligence gathering system, which it is. If you look at the flow chart with Facebook and top down, right, you would see that it is set up to basically get as much biometric information as possible. So what it does is it trades that information. And it doesn't necessarily come out on the bottom line, right? It doesn't come out on the spreadsheet. So how can you take that to a board meeting or something quarterly? You can't. All right, so here we are. We've got our pal Sarsen. I tell you, man, Blog Talk is wonky tonight. I have to reload the pages all the time to see if there's anybody in there. Okay, here we go. Let's bring in our friend, the arch-mage from the Midwest, giving us the lowdown, the view from the streets. With the NATO summit, it's our friend Sarsen. Hey, Sarsen.
Hey, I was thinking I wasn't going to get in.
You know, I don't know what it is, man. Maybe it's the Eclipse, or maybe I've got Blog Talk 1.0, or I don't know. But it seems like I have to do everything manually now with Blog Talk. Before, people would just show up and they'd be in the queue. Now I've got to refresh the window, and here you are. So welcome, and thanks for coming on and joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
So what's happening out there? What's the geopolitical temperature look like?
Well, I'm like I told you, I'm 35 miles west of where everything's happening, but it's just been very strange. Chicago is totally disrupted. The traffic pattern, people have, they closed all the museums for the weekend. So the reasons that people had for going downtown, most of them are gone. And it's just it's got the kind of feeling like a
like a 4-day holiday, the day that everyone's going to sleep in late, that kind of feel to it. So I know a lot of people aren't going that I know that work downtown. They're not going into work tomorrow. A lot of businesses are closed. A lot of businesses have told their employees to work from home. And part of the traffic pattern is that there's an expressway that runs right along Lake Michigan, and they're diverting it because it goes right through McCormick Place, actually. So the traffic pattern is being routed through the downtown section, which is not very traffic friendly to start with, and then west and then down, and then after it gets further south, and it hooks back in where it's supposed to. So there's just a lot of disruption. One of the things to keep in mind is that McCormick Place is probably 5 miles south of downtown. So these marches that are going on, I think they're able to march probably about 4 miles before they get turned back. And there's been stuff going on the north side all the way up to Wrigley Field, where Emmanuel lives. So we're dealing with an area that's probably 10 miles north to south and probably 2 miles thick in some places. So it's a very large area for any kind of demonstration or anything like that. So it's spread out all over the place. There doesn't seem to be, there's not a front line, a focus, a center place where everybody's meeting and all that kind of thing. So,
right.
And so, there's groups of 200 people here and there, it seems, but nothing too big. A couple of the live feeds I've seen this evening, it seems like there's maybe 1,000 people in a few places, but and I'm not really sure where they're at. I've had watching with the sound down, so I'm not picking up any cues on the locations. But now McCormick Place is really interesting. It's 2.6 million feet of show space.
Mm-hmm.
It's the largest convention center in the United States, if not the world. And there's a lot of other things going on there, too. There's just the amount of, there's 173 meeting rooms, 600,000 square feet of space for meetings, 4 ballrooms that are between 21 and 100,000 square feet. There's a theater that holds over 4,000, and there's assembly seating for 18,000. So there's a lot of stuff there. There's multiple buildings, and one of the things that's not that I saw on the television news thing 2 days ago is that they apparently have some exhibitions of weapons and those kind of things, and there's of course nobody on the inside to report on any of these things, but it seems that the missile defense system for Europe is one of the major topics,
right.
And apparently they've got stuff to show. So I don't know if there's other weapon systems and things like that are there, but
well, that's fascinating. So McCormick, is it McCormick Place? Is that what the name of it is?
Right. Uh-huh.
So it's like a city it's like a city within a city, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's really no hotel. I think there may be a few hotels down there now, but mainly it's about 5 miles south of the Loop where the downtown stuff is. Or as a sports fan, it's about another mile south of Soldier Field on the lakefront. So these marches are basically, they're going a long way, and they're getting turned back about at 18th Street, and McCormick Place is on like 22nd Street. So they're getting maybe a half mile away, and getting turned around. So
they've got a half a mile buffer zone around the meeting area. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or even more than that. And a lot of the area between right along the lakefront is parking for the stadium and for the museums and all that kind of stuff too. So it's not a residential area or a business area or anything like that. It's very, very much an island.
Right. Right. So I wanted to ask you, what about these 3 guys that got arrested the other day prior to the NATO summit? What's the story behind these 3 guys?
Well, there's let's see, it was last evening they had they put online it wasn't the indictment papers, but it was for the bond hearing. was a 3-page court document explaining what they were charged with and all of that, and I think they were trying to get $5 million bond on each one. And the police apparently have known everything that's been going on with this since May 8th. So there was 10 days of, I mean, they were quoting conversations and all sorts of things. So this may be one of those FBI things where they set the thing up to trap some people in it,
Right.
Type of thing, and then sponsored it. But supposedly they bought some gasoline and started making some Molotov cocktails, was the story. And there's also been 2 other individuals in different areas, apparently not connected with them, that are picked up for the same thing. So all these guys are in their 20s, white guys from out of town, I guess. So that seems to be it. So it's really can't tell if there's something to it or not to it. The guy that owned the building was a 65-year-old Occupy Wall Street protest friendly guy or protester. He had some other people that were staying. I think he let people stay for maybe coming in from out of town or something. So
it was an Occupy cell then. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah. It seems that every day there's been something a little bit different flavor. Thursday was kind of the start of things, and that was kind of the Occupy people coming in, and it was kind of a reunion type thing, small groups. Friday morning started with there was a nurses union, national union that was here. I think they had maybe 3,000 nurses that were marching about cuts in Medicare and Medicaid. They're my favorites so far. They were all dressed in red T-shirts and red windbreakers with Robin Hood hats they had made out of green felt
Nice.
with red felt feathers on them. So they're quite striking. But that was Friday early. There's been, you saw from the photographs, there's like art people at times. There's times that it's Occupy people.
Yeah.
And there's the group, the Black Bloc, the troublemaking anarchist guys.
The infamous Black Bloc, who are all wearing police shoes.
Yeah. So, really? I haven't seen any foot shots yet.
In the past, the Black Bloc, whether it's in Canada or places like Pittsburgh, they've been outed because they've been wearing police issue shoes.
Okay.
So maybe they've changed their footwear now and are a little more anonymous than they were before.
Well, what they've been doing is they run through the demonstrators to get up to the police to fight the police, and then they cause whatever havoc's been going on. And actually, the police seem to be relatively restrained compared to what I would have expected, was going on in that. And I have no idea how many thousands there are, but they were stretched out. The other thing that's been going on here is that the Cubs and White Sox baseball teams are playing each other in their crosstown games. So they've been playing up at Wrigley Field, and a friend of mine that went to the game said that there were police, at least 4, on every street corner of every block that they drove through. So I mean, a good part of the city has a spread out police force. What I've seen on the demonstrators is that there's at least 2 or 3 on either side of them walking the streets, and at the beginning there was probably thousands of police for hundreds of demonstrators. Now it's probably thousands of police for thousands of demonstrators, but so really no.
I've often wondered what the mindset of one of these guys in riot gear is. What's it like to be inside their head? I mean, because I'm sure that some of these guys they're just, kind of regular people. I'm not saying all of them are. Some of them are certifiable psychopaths. Some of them are card-carrying, handshaking members of fraternal organizations. And then you got some guys that are just along for the ride and the pension. What goes through their heads when they're going through this thing and having to face, having to face these people, you know? And I've often wondered that.
Yeah, it's I think they've behaved fairly well. The rhetoric is kind of going back to old Mayor Daley, the 1968 convention, with all of the trouble and all of that. So that's kind of the rough talk that's being put out, you know, on one level. But there hasn't been anything yet that got into that. But I've got a feeling tomorrow though is going to be interesting. So. The NATO conference runs all day. I think probably breaks up around 5 o'clock. So I haven't heard of anything that's planned on that yet, but that should be interesting.
Yeah, I have a sense too that Monday is going to be a flashpoint for Chicago tomorrow for sure. Yeah, you know, I'm looking at Emmanuel, who's your mayor. What was his relationship like with Chicago? So he was born in Chicago, right? And he grew up there, and he just moved back, or he lived there all along, just jumped in and decided to be mayor.
Well, he was. Yeah, there was some debate of whether he would be allowed to run for mayor or not, because he wasn't a resident of Chicago, and that's one of the things, you have to live in Chicago to be mayor of Chicago. So, but he apparently owned a building that he was leasing out to somebody else. So he evicted the person and got over whatever court challenge there was on that. He was a U.S. congressman for one of the North Side areas of Chicago. So that's where he comes from, and it was basically just kind of involved in his area. It didn't really have anything to do with the area or anything like that. So. Mm-hmm. No,
well, the eclipse is happening exactly opposite his sun. You know, he's born the 29th of November, which would put him right around, 6 degrees, I think, Sagittarius, 5, 6 degrees Sagittarius. So so the moon, the eclipse moon, is happening opposite his sun. This should be an interesting post-eclipse period for Emmanuel. That's my sense. Yeah,
it should be. There seems to be more and more criticism of him as time's gone on. And actually the police are no friends of his. He's done a lot of cuts and budget cuts and cut a lot of things. And there was a lot of hard feelings that they, you know, with all of what's happening here, that I heard that they were bringing in police from other states, and a good amount from Pennsylvania were supposed to be in here too. So. We'll see what happens with all of that.
So he brought in police from outside of Illinois to help police this thing?
Yeah, I've got a friend who works with the police, and he said that there was he wasn't sure how many, but they're definitely brought in outside police. And probably suburban police and all those kind of things too. So because it seems at times that there's, you know, thousands in one location. So you can't call everybody in with everything else that's going on in the city and stuff like that too. So there's got to be extras coming.
So isn't today also the annual interleague play between the White Sox and the Cubs? Isn't that taking place?
Yeah, they play 3 games. These were this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was the 3 games at Wrigley Field. The Cubs who lost all 3. So, and then I think about a month or so they play at on the south side, the White Sox stadium, which is within walking distance of McCormick Place. It's a good thing that they weren't there this weekend. They would have been a total mess.
Right. Yeah, and they were going to have the G8 summit there at the same time, or is that? And they got moved, right?
Yeah, they were scheduled for Friday, Saturday, I think it was, or Thursday, Friday. I can't remember which 2 days, but they would have been here, and I think they were thinking that the amount of protests for that would have been probably 4 times as large as what NATO would be. Mm-hmm. So they kept that. They moved that. Actually, I think it was at the beginning of March, but they really didn't talk about it much and took it to Camp David, and I didn't actually hear anything about the meeting there, so it's been totally off the news.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty dark around G8. They just basically said that they were going to be committed towards sanctions against Iran. Do you know about Camp David as a cloning facility? Do you know about that?
No.
Yeah. So in the darker, more conspiratorial circles, apparently the word in the street is that it's a major cloning center, and that when presidents go to Camp David to relax or retreat, they're getting a makeover. That's the conspiratorial view, and in a weird way, it kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, George Bush went to Camp David a lot. So.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah. The other thing I was telling you is that they made a major chemtrail spray change here. There was we've always had the kind of low level, just kind of estimating, but maybe the 10 to 15,000 foot stuff that would build clouds and block out the sun eventually, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And what they did this week is they switched to really high altitude stuff. It was, maybe 30, 40,000 feet type of thing, way up above any kind of clouds. And it didn't build up any kind of cloud base most of the time. It just kind of just haze. And I sent you a couple of photographs at sunset here in the west, and you could see it was just the amount of glow. You can't really even see the sun. It's just this blob of light that just spread out from all the refraction.
Yeah.
So so that's one of the things. People that I've been talking with today, a lot of people just seem to be really kind of centered and quiet and deep, and that kind of thing. And for me, it seems that time's actually slowed down today. It's been running so fast all the time, but today just seems that it's really that everything just kind of seems in control and just kind of running at a pace that I have control over. So I had a headache. It was when the eclipse started. Here, I think they said that the beginning of it was like around 4:30. I got a headache. It was kind of like a migraine. It was like that eye pain that you get with the migraine, but it wasn't a migraine. It wasn't a migraine, but it was that same kind of area, that kind of eye pain type of thing, which is pretty much dissipated now. But just everything just seems kind of quiet and quiet.
Well, that's good. We can use a little quiet. Let's hope it's not the calm before the storm or the eye of the hurricane. But that's good. And congratulations on achieving a sense of slower time. I can't grasp time anymore. It's like I wake up and the day is over.
That's the way my days usually go. But so I'm hoping I hold on to this, so it just doesn't dissipate as of tomorrow and just disappear. But
yeah. Well, good. We'll hang in there and hold on with that time strand for as long as possible. Well, good. What did you do for the eclipse? Did you do anything special?
I took a walk out and tried to take some photographs, but the ones I sent you were about the best of it. There really wasn't much going on. We've had thunderstorms here. There hasn't been any rain here, but there was real heavy rain north of us, and right now there's thunderstorms going all the way from Memphis up through St. Louis, through Illinois, over Lake Michigan, and all the way up into Ontario. So it's this huge, it's probably about probably 40, 50 miles south of me that where all these thunderstorms are going, but it's just really long system of storms. So we've had, it's been overcast and potentially stormy, but nothing's developed here or in the downtown Chicago area either. So there was one other story that just kind of a side story. There was a restaurant on the south side of Chicago on, I think it was Saturday at noon. There were 20 people that met there, and that apparently didn't know each other. And as they met in this restaurant, a group of 15 to 20 young men dressed in black with baseball bats and hammers that were described as with 24-inch handles, like railroad hammers, ran in and started beating them and breaking tables and all of that. And the local paper down there reported tonight that the mob that attacked was anti-fascist, and the group that was getting attacked was the 5th annual White Nationalist Economic Summit, and Illinois White Nationalist meet and greet. So
were they beating themselves up and they didn't know it, or what was the story behind that?
Well, with the anti-fascists were the black dressed guys that came in. They were always in their teens or early 20s, and the people that they were beating on were white supremacists. So they were having some kind of a meeting. So
wow, interesting.
So there's little side things that are going on all over this. So, why they would choose to come here for that kind of thing, I don't know. But
maybe it's the food. Maybe the white supremacist fare is just superior in Illinois. Yeah. You never know. All right, my friend. Well, thank you for calling in. I really appreciate you taking time out to do this. I know it's a long day for you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
And you take care of yourself. All right.
Okay. You too.
Ooh, I hate that. All right. We'll see you on the back end. All right.
Okay.
All right. Take care. All right. That's our friend Sarsen calling in from just outside of Chicago, giving us the expanded Sagittarian view. He is a Sagittarius, by the way. The expanded Sagittarian view of this Gemini Sun, Gemini Moon, partial eclipse. And for the last 2 hours, you've been listening to people from all over the country, starting with Melody Scott Zindell in Boulder, Colorado, Richard Mystical Sun in Mount Shasta, and Sarsen from just outside of Chicago in Illinois. I'm Robert Phoenix. I've been talking to you from the edge of America in Point Richmond, California, and I'll be back tomorrow to do an overview on the Monday mashup and see what happens over the course of the next 24 hours with this post-eclipse energy. Okay, thank you for tuning in, for listening, and for sharing the experience. And I hope that this energy of the eclipse impacts you in your life in a way that is empowering, no matter how it manifests, and that you can separate the wheat from the chaff. And as you do so, use your head to discern what's real and your heart to step